As Australians tumble towards yet another almost meaningless election between two almost meaningless parties that can't really articulate any policies in any way that gives you any assurance that they're worth the effort and the money spent in regard to anything at all, regard to employment or regard to climate. See, Australians are already suffering, thousands, hundreds of thousands of Australians are already suffering a sort of climate catastrophe, an environmental catastrophe, a social, economic catastrophe. And there are so many Australians now that are homeless, or we're going to be more and more of them by the end of this year, 2022, by if they put the interest rates up and the escalation in price of mortgages, even though who's buying these we don't know, must then create a massive amount of increase in homelessness, mortgage stress, rental stress. Yet what do we hear from any of the parties? All of them. I'm not just blaming ALP, Greens, Liberals, but there's several other parties involved. And I haven't heard anything because the media is very shallow in how it reports on elections or politics in general these days. It hardly reports anything at all, more like magazine stuff. But nonetheless, there's a catastrophe right now in Australia in regards to the climate because a lot of people now are living out in it. And no matter what state the climate is, winter, summer, dry, whatever, people living outdoors in the climate are suffering it, and they're suffering most. So if we're going to talk about the causes or the effects of climate change, not just the cause of climate change, it is the effects of climate change that ought to be considered most, and obviously the effects of climate change, which can be floods, droughts, whatever, are not really taken into consideration because there's been no preparation for this in regards to having an emergency workforce. For all the talk about climate change, there's been no preparation work whatsoever, only billions of dollars spent on windmills, on solar panels, and now EVs and all that. But not much, nothing spent on the remedial use of town water in the inland, which is a more stable climatic area in which to grow food in. I mean, organic, sustainable, organic food growing can be carried on in the, not the outback, but the mid-west of Australia, from New South Wales and up, that has plenty of water going through towns and it's wasted, evaporating in the sun, many of them. But that water is not used to grow food or not used to employ people growing food. As if people don't realise where food comes from. It just goes to the supermarket and gets it out of the supermarket. Now there's a food shortages in a place that hasn't really prepared at all for climate change. It spent all this money, all this time talking about climate change, and then it talks about equality and discrimination. All these things have come along: climate change, equality, discrimination, asylum seekers, have compassion for them. Yet, where's the compassion? Where's the compassion for the people who are affected now by climate and living in the street and homeless because of it, and homeless also because of COVID? Disruptions to employment because of COVID, disruption to their income stream because of COVID, and policies surrounding that. Where's the compassion towards that? Where's the equality after we've heard all about equality and anti-discrimination, compassion for our asylum seekers, etc.? Where's the compassion? Where's the same compassion from the same people and the same media for those Australians now suffering from climate catastrophe, which is the floods, and also the lack of food in the shops? Where's the equality in regards to all those people put out of work because of COVID and can't get back into employment because of COVID restrictions still? They can't get back into employment. Where's the lack of discrimination in regards to them? How come they're not being treated equally now? As asylum seekers, we're promoted to be treated equally and without discrimination. And why isn't climate change really as important matter as they make out? Because if you're not acting on the effects of it, that is the shortages of food, by looking at regional food growing using town water, and there's plenty of regions, there's plenty of water, they're just wasting it. It's just wasted resource, which is then a massive, endless waste of resource in the amount of organic food you can grow and the amount of people you could employ. And also, you can then rethink about housing for those sort of people without restrictions on whether they're being jabbed or not, because that would be then going along with this thesis we've had for years, this political thesis about anti-discrimination, treating everyone equally, etc., and doing something about climate change. All seems to me now to be hollow words by hollow people. So as we go to this election, think about your vote. If anyone watches this, which is would be unusual, but as we go towards the election, what are you voting for? Not who you're voting for. What are you voting for? What are we supposed to be voting for? Some people calling each other names and making empty gestures about things they really can't actually explain or articulate in any way that makes any sense to anyone who's actually listening, who actually understands what the problem of climate change means, because climate change has happened many, many times in human history. It's not the cause of climate change what matters, it's the effects of it what matter. And when it affects food supply and housing and stuff like that, and people are put in the streets and stuff like that, and cause them to go hungry as well, that is a direct effect of climate change. That is an effect of it. So talking about the cause is one thing, but the point of the argument and discussion is the effect of it. Unless we can talk about the effect of climate change, the great moral challenge of our time, where's the morality in this election in regards to all those people disenfranchised because of COVID, disrupted because of the floods, and all those people who are out of work, who could now be in work, in actual climate work, without any restrictions. The COVID thing is supposed to be people getting around with no masks now, so it must be less problem. So when is the COVID over? When is it over? So that people can go to work who need to work for their own dignity, working on real climate action, preparing places using recycled water, growing food, and creating a housing system for these people who are willing to work on that. The people who don't want to work, that's their problem. That's their problem. The people who want to work ought to be able to work on a national employment system in Australia that employs people regardless of they injected or not, on things that are in regards to looking after the effects of climate change, and then let the other people in the corporate sphere look after the parts that are the causes of climate change. And that would be a more sustainable, social, organic, economic, balanced than it is at the moment, which is only a politically correct corporate view of the world that is so contradictory and so full of hypocrisy. Why isn't the media? It's actually quite astonishing, really. We have an election about, I haven't heard anything yet what makes sense in regards to the problems this country, Australia, is facing. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to be homeless, and that, where's the policies? Where's the policy about food and water and hydrology, and actually policies on the effects of climate change are missing? So surely they've missed the whole point.